In today's episode, we're going to get back to working on the T-Trak module kit from Kato, made by Woodland Scenics, and get started on adding the scenery. This is the first time I will be working with the Woodland Scenics Shaper Sheets. Welcome to Humanity Junction, where the city intersects with humans. Before we get going down the track, I just want to mention that I'm doing some technical upgrades and some of them derailed, but I hope you still enjoy this walkthrough of starting the scenery on one of my T-Trak module kits from Kato, made by Woodland Scenics. Today's video is sponsored by CMR Products and Iron Planet Hobbies, as well as my individual supporters. There will be more information later in the video. My adventure with these modules started back in episode 45. During this episode, I showed the process of building this module up to the point where I could run trains on it. I also spoke about my thoughts on the modules. I've been running trains on this module for the last 3 months, and I thought it was time to start the scenery. This kit comes with a shaper sheet and some plaster, so this is going to be the focus of this video. In this video, I'm going to show some of the successes and pitfalls that I experienced along the way. Using the pictures on the box as a very loose guide, I'm targeting the middle image as my goal for this video, but in my vision, the water area is going to be a lot smaller. As I begin this process, I do not have any reference images. I'm moving forward following the voices in my head. You can see the package for the Digitrack's UT6D utility throttle in the bottom corner. I will be reviewing this new throttle release in a future video. Before I get to adding the scenery, I'm going to use blue painter's tape to cover the track. I definitely have a love-hate relationship with this step. I want to believe that I can be careful enough to not get anything on the tracks, and I do not want to waste my time on something that in my head I think is unnecessary. And yet, anytime I go against my common sense telling me that I should cover the track, that is when I end up messing up the track and spend even longer cleaning the tracks at the end. Are you like me and you do not want to do the prep steps, or is this something that you do every time without fail? As you can see, I finally took my own advice and covered all the track before starting. Maybe you can teach this old dog a new trick. After finishing the build of the modules in episode 45, I packed all the remaining parts in one box. So my next step is pulling out all of the materials that came included with the kit that I'm going to use for the scenery. I will need one 18-inch by 24-inch Woodland shaper sheet, 2 10-ounce bags of shaper sheet plaster, 1 roll of 25 sticky dots, and the instruction sheet in case I decide to follow the directions. The shaper sheet is a heavy aluminum material on one side with a white fuzzy thin felt on the other side. When you bend the material, it's able to hold its shape. For my water feature, I'm going to install a culvert on the bottom side of the tracks. The water will come out of the culvert in a stream and then collect in a pool of water closer to the edge of the module. So that the water feature seems to extend past the edge of the module, I'm going to cut out a piece of the edge. I'm using a Sharpie to mark the section that I'm going to cut out. As I've said in the past, I do not recommend using Sharpies, as when you add the ground cover, the alcohol will cause the Sharpie ink to come back to the surface. But since I'm going to completely cut out this section, a Sharpie makes the line easier to see. Using a box cutter, I hack away small pieces until I have the sidewall cut out as desired. Does anyone else dislike cutting white foam as much as I do? I very much prefer working with extended polystyrene, the XPS Foam, when cutting, but cutting this small area was not too bad. Just take your time making small cuts and ease closer and closer to the line as you go. Next, I'm going to use a spare corner of track to cut out a piece of the shaper sheet. I was planning to start on the outside corner of the module. I say planning because at this point I'm making several mistakes, and I was doing this step during a live stream and no one in the chat stopped me from making these mistakes. The first mistake that I was making is that I was marking out the inside of the track, not the outside of the track. But the bigger mistake that I'm making is that I'm marking and cutting out the shaper sheet before I'd crinkled it up into the desired shape. If you get one thing out of this video, it's to shape your shaper sheet as much as possible before cutting the edge shape that you desire. This is definitely a rookie mistake, and I'm about to learn this lesson the hard way. One thing that is going to come in very handy to solve this issue is that I did not cut the curve very close to the corner, so I do have some extra material to work with. Cutting the shaper sheet with scissors is very easy. I'm using a pair of Fiskars 5-inch non-stick titanium detail scissors. I really like these scissors for cutting out shapes, but I have different scissors that I use when I need to cut straight lines. And this is the moment that I realized that I cut out the wrong curve. Well, the good news is that the flat shaper sheets line up perfectly with the inside of the curve of the track. The bad news is that I'm about to start shaping the sheet and finding out that as you fold something, it gets shorter in length. Well, I am here now, so let's start shaping the sheet and find out a way to save all of these mistakes that I've made. What I realized is that if I fold over the track edge side of the shaper sheet, that I can change the curve of the inside edge enough that I'll be able to make this sheet work. What ultimately saved me here is the additional material I have by not cutting the curve as close to the corner as possible. I spent a lot of time working the sheet. The hardest part of making it look natural was removing the straight fold lines from when the sheet is folded to fit it into the packaging. Once I got it close, I started applying sticky dots along the folded edge. I'm going to use these dots to attach the shaper sheet to the side of the track riser. The sticky dots worked pretty well for this section, but something like hot glue would have definitely been easier. I kept working the edge to get it as close as possible to the track. I knew that I would be filling in the gaps with plaster, so I just needed to get it close enough to make the shape that I wanted. The holes in the bottom of the module made it really easy to be able to work from both sides. I even flipped the module over to work on the edge at one point. I pulled out a 50-foot boxcar to check the height of the hill or mountain in relation to the boxcar. Eventually I got it set up where I wanted, but the gap was too big to keep the plaster from running through to the workbench. My solution for this was Gaffers Tape. I know the joke is that if something does not move and it should, you use WD-40, and if something moves and it should not, you use duct tape. Well, in film, television, and theater, we use Gaffers Tape for everything. Gaffers Tape is a heavy cotton cloth, pressure-sensitive tape with strong adhesive and tensile properties. This is not cheap tape, but is very good at what it does. The tape did a really good job helping to hold the sticky dots to the edge. I need to go into my storage unit to get a piece of foam for the outside edge of the mountain, so I'm going to move on to working on the outside side of the tracks. I'll come back later and finish this side. Due to the complex shapes that I wanted to achieve, I decided to build the shapes of this section with smaller pieces of the shaper sheet. This time I knew to crinkle the sheet prior to cutting the edge along the track. My first attempt to attach the sheet was with Aleen's Tacky glue. I had a feeling that this glue would take too long to set and not be a great choice for attaching the sheet to the track riser. And everyone in the chat agreed, making the suggestion to use hot glue, and they were right. Hot glue worked really well for this. The detail scissors were especially convenient for shaping the sheet in these sections. I started working on where I wanted the culvert and the stream running out from the culvert. I did this sort of by trial and error. The hot glue worked really well attaching this narrow piece of shaper sheet exactly where I wanted it. After getting a general location for the stream, I started working on the shape for the collection pool at the bottom. At this point, I was completely building based on the ideas in my head and what I thought looked good. The really good thing with the shaper sheet is that you can try different things before you glue anything into place. I again used hot glue to secure this piece into place along the edge of the module. I secured one side first, and then once it was set, I glued down the other side. I then cut the stream to length and connected the stream to the collection pool. The next step is filling in all the open spaces, creating the shapes that I want to later be able to fill in with plaster. At this point, I would not say that there's any method to my madness. I'm using thinner strips to connect one area to another. CMR Products has designed and developed several in-house brands and are continually creating new products. Please check out their products at cmrproducts.com and use the discount code HUMAN for 7% off their in-house brands. It was at this point that I realized I should not be cutting the shaper sheet with straight edges. When connecting two sections together, if the line is straight, it's very obvious and it's not a natural edge. But if I make the edge wavy, it looks a lot more natural when connecting the two pieces together. When using the hot glue, I also find that it's very important to press the edges together very well. The Gorilla Glue will fill in the gap if you do not push it together well, but I find a tighter connection between the sections will look a lot better. From here on out, I'm using wavy edges and tight seams. Iron Planet Hobbies is a model railroad shop that specializes in DCC, and they stock nearly 100% of Digitrack's NCE, TCS, Soundtrack's, Digikai's, ESU, and Nix trains. They also have select products from other brands. Please visit their website at ironplanethobbies.com and use the discount code HUMAN at checkout to receive a 10% discount and free shipping in the USA. You can see in this close-up how the wavy edge gives a more natural look. I'm not 100% sure that this steep of a cliff was the correct solution for this section, but this is sort of the shape that this area really wanted to take, so I just went with it. And now a huge thank you to all my supporters on both Patreon and those that have purchased items through my Teespring store. If you would like to find out more information about supporting this channel, all of the links are in the description below. This last big piece is not ideal, but I wanted to use as much of the scraps that I had left over. I'm going to have to use a smaller piece to fill in the final gap. Using the smaller piece enabled me to make a nice wavy surface area to connect everything together. Coming up with the wavy edge idea really helped make piecing the sections of the shaper sheet look more natural. Now I'm going to go back to the other side of the module and make the foam sides needed to secure the top of the mountain. I am using scrap pieces of XPS foam that I have left over. I start by cutting the piece of foam in half so that I have two 1 foot long sections. I cut angles in the foam just to get the basic shape going. I know I will need to continue shaping, but these initial cuts will help me when test fitting. I then use hot glue to secure the foam pieces into a 90-degree corner. I'm using a 1-2-3 machinist block to make sure the joint is perpendicular. I then start test fitting and taking off small pieces of foam, working towards the desired shape. Once I could see the shape that I wanted, I added a natural curve into the foam and cleaned up the edges. I tested the first side and then went on to the other. Once I liked the shape, I glued the XPS foam to the white foam in the corner. Then I used my detail scissors to cut off the extra shaper sheet. I cut the sheet to align with the center of the foam. In hindsight, I should have aligned the edge of the shaper sheet with the edge of the foam. I'll have to fix this now with plaster. I also used hot glue to attach the shaper sheet to the top of the XPS foam. Since I had the hot glue gun out, I started using it to fill in some of the gaps that I thought plaster would seep through while applying the base coat. I even filled in the holes of the track riser. Each of the T-Trak module kits from Kato made by Woodland Scenics come with 2 bags of shaper plaster. I was not sure how much I would need, so I started with 1 bag. I added the water, slowly mixing it in, as well as tinted the plaster brown with some acrylic paint. It seemed like I had put too much water in at first, but I just kept stirring and it firmed up as it went. I used a 1-inch chip brush to apply the base coat of plaster. I applied it just like I would with paint and just kept going until I'd covered the entire module. One problem that I had were brush strokes. Because I made the plaster thick enough to not drip through the seams, using a brush to apply it created brush lines. If you have any suggestions on how to resolve this issue when applying the second coat of plaster, please leave the suggestion in the comments below. I know that Woodland Scenics makes a plaster brush set. They look very similar to the brushes that carpenters use to apply wood glue. Would this solve my issue? My other thought is to make the next layer of plaster a lot thinner so that it will self-level and hopefully fill in the previous layer's brush strokes. This is the final step for this video and completes the first of the 2 modules using all of the supplied materials in the T-Trak module kit from Kato made by Woodland Scenics. There are several additional steps that I want to take to complete the scenery on this module. I'm going to add a second coat of plaster, hopefully smoothing out the brush strokes. I will figure out the edge of the stream and the pond so that I can detail the water's edge and paint the bottom of the water feature. While I figured out all the initial shapes without reference images, I am going to go now look for some images to determine the colors and various scenic elements that I want to add to the module. I will continue to video my trials and tribulations so that you can learn along with me as I try new materials and techniques. Thank you for following along on the journey. I am what I am because of who we all are. Thank you for watching. Please leave any comments or questions below and hit the thumbs up. Please subscribe and select the bell icon to be notified about future videos and join this community. Thank you and have a great day.